What's up everyone, my name's Dave and today I'm going to make a drill press table. The table is going to be 22 inches wide by 14 inches deep and it's going to be made of Baltic birch plywood doubled up, with a third piece underneath of it to raise the table high enough to stay out of the way of the drill press height adjustment. I'll start by cutting all the pieces for the table and the fence to the rough dimensions over at the table saw. I'll leave everything a little bit oversized for now. The fence for the drill press table is going to be 2 inches tall and 22 inches long and made up of 3 pieces of Baltic birch plywood laminated together. I'll start by applying glue to all the parts and then getting everything clamped up. Here I'm taking some dimensions off the cast iron table so I can create 4 blocks that'll slide into these slots and align the wood table with the metal one. I'll cut the width of the blocks to the table saw and then go over to the miter saw to cut them to length. The height adjuster on the drill press has a longer arm than you might think, so I need to cut out a recess on the bottom board of the table so that the height adjuster has some room to clear it. This cutout plus the riser block that I'll sit underneath the table should be enough for the arm to clear. Now that the fence pieces have had some time to dry, I'll go ahead and clean up one face at the joiner, the other at the table saw, and then take it over to the miter saw to chop the ends off and square everything up. Next, I'll chuck up a drill bit and make sure that the cast iron table is centered with the drill press. Now I can bring the boards over and set them in place and make sure that the table clears the height adjuster in the back and make sure that the lever arm for the drill press doesn't hit the top of the drill press or the fence. Next, I'll make sure the wood parts are centered up on the drill press and then I'll drill a small hole in the center. I'm going to use this to lay out where I'm going to make a sacrificial insert so that I can have zero clearance when I'm drilling through parts and I can change out this insert when it gets worn out. The insert's going to be the thickness of one of the pieces of plywood, 3 inches square, and it's going to be offset a little bit to the drill bit. This way I can wear out one spot, rotate it, and wear out another spot. Do that 4 times and then I could flip it over and then I have 4 more areas to wear out before I have to replace it. I'm going to use a jigsaw to cut out the square, but you could use a router as well with some fences if you wanted to get a better, straighter line. So I'll start by drilling out 4 corners, and then I'll clamp the board to my workbench, and then just come back with the jigsaw, take my time, and make the cuts. Since the jigsaw doesn't leave the finish as clean as a router would, I had to come in and use a file to clean up the sides and the corners. And while I had the file out, I went ahead and rounded over the back corner where the height adjuster for the table is going to be, just so there's no sharp edges. Now I'm ready to start gluing up the table pieces, and I'm going to do this in 2 stages. First I'll do the 2 tabletops, and then I'll come back and do the riser block. So for now I'll apply some glue to one of the sides of the tabletop, making sure not to get any glue where the insert's going to go, and then I'll press the 2 pieces together. I'll apply as many clamps as I can to the edge of the boards, and then for the middle, since I can't reach clamps in there, I'll use the heaviest object I can find, in this case a mortiser, to apply some pressure while the glue sets up. I'll give the glue a couple hours to set up, then I'll take the clamps off, apply the riser block, repeat the glue process and clamps, and let that set overnight. The next morning I'll take the glued up assembly over to the table saw and flush up all 4 sides. I'll make sure to trim the same amount off at each side so that I end up with the finished dimensions of 14 by 22 and I still keep the sacrificial insert centered on the table. Here I'm laying out for 3 pieces of T-track that are going to go on the table. The 2 on the outside are going to hold the fence in place and give me some spots to use hold down clamps, and then a 3rd piece in the middle in case I need an additional hold down area. I'm using a dado stack in the table saw to make the cut. I'll start by setting the width of the dado and then use the T-track itself to adjust the depth of the cut. I'll make a test cut in a scrap board and then test fit the T-track to make sure I have a snug fit. And once I know I have everything set right, I'll go ahead and make the 2 outside grooves for the table. For the third piece of T-track in the middle of the table, I'll use a stop block set on my fence so that I don't cut too far in. I'm also adding a piece of T-track to the fence to hold a stop block in place, and I'll go ahead and make that cut now. After all the grooves are made, I'll mark out the lengths of all the pieces of T-track I need and cut them out with a hacksaw at my bench vise. I'll use a mill file to clean up the rough ends left from the saw. And then I had a Sharpie on hand that just happened to match the same color as the T-track, so I went ahead and colored in the ends, and it actually blends in pretty good. The T-track comes pre-drilled with some holes to hold it down to whatever you're attaching it to, but the piece in the middle only had one hole and I needed to add 2 more. So I went to the drill press and drilled a couple holes for number 6 screws and then made a couple countersinks. The next step is to drill a couple of holes all the way through the fence so it can attach to the table. The T-track bolts are 1/4 20, but I want to drill them a little bit oversized so the fence doesn't bind when I'm trying to slide it back and forth. Now I'm ready to start sanding and prepping the table for assembly. I'll start by rounding over all the corners over at the drum sander, and then I'll use some 220 grit paper and a random orbital sander to clean up the rest of the table. To install the T-tracks to the table, I'll start by applying a little bit of the CA glue that I got from Starbond to the bottom of the track. And then I'll go ahead and apply some accelerator to the table and then put the 2 pieces together to temporarily hold everything in place. Then I can come back in with some number 6 screws, screw everything down, and that should be it. These tracks shouldn't go anywhere. The new drill press table is going to be aligned to the cast iron one with these wooden blocks that I cut out earlier. I'm drilling a couple of 1/4 20 holes through them because I'm going to be installing hanger bolts or 1/4 20 studs that some star knobs can attach to, and this will allow me to quickly take the table on and off. Over at the drill press, I'll align the table in its place and then use some more of that Starbond CA glue and accelerator to temporarily glue these blocks in through the cast iron table into the wood one and align everything temporarily. I've never really used super glue in my shop all that much, mostly because it's messy and hard to deal with and I tend to glue my fingers together a lot. But Starbond had sent me some samples to try out, and between the applicator and the accelerator that came with it, this stuff's really easy to use and it's making my life a lot easier in a couple of situations so far. I'll leave a link in the description for where you can purchase the glue, the T-tracks, and the rest of the hardware that I used in this project if you're interested. With the alignment blocks temporarily held in place, I can take the table off the drill press, bring it over to the bench, and install a couple of brads in each block. Then I'll bring it back over to the drill press and install it to the cast iron table real quick, just to make sure nothing moved and that it slides on and off easily. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll be using 1/4 20 studs or hanger bolts to install the wood table to the cast iron one. So first thing I need to do is to cut a little length off of the part of the stud that installs into the wood table. They're just a little bit too long from the store. Next I'll drill a couple of pilot holes into the drill press table where the hanger bolts will be installed. Installing the studs to the wood parts are pretty simple. Just put 2 nuts on the 1/4 20 side of the bolt and tighten them against each other. And then you can use a ratchet to drive the stud into the wood. Once you've bottomed out the coarse part of the threads into the wood, you can crack the 2 nuts loose, take them off, and you're ready to go. Now that the hanger bolts are in place, I can install the wood table to the cast iron one, grab some fender washers and 1/4 20 star knobs, and tighten everything down. Here I'm drilling a hole all the way through the drill press table underneath where the sacrificial insert was going to go, and this will allow me to take a screwdriver and punch it up from the bottom just in case the insert ever gets stuck in there. Now I can grab a piece of scrap plywood, head over to the table saw, and cut out a couple of 3-inch square pieces. I'll take the parts over to the sander and ease all the edges and corners with some 220 grit paper. Then I'll take them over to the drill press table and give them a test drive, make sure that they fit in nice and loose and I can remove them easily. I wanted to add some type of protection to the table, so I'm applying a couple of coats of wipe-on polyurethane to the table and to the fence and the stop block that I made for it. I'll let the finish dry overnight, and then I can install the fence to the table using some star knobs and a couple of 1/4-20 T-track bolts that I picked up. I also made a stop block just to make repeated drill holes easy. I just used a piece of 3/4 inch plywood for that and another 1/4-20 T-track bolt. And I ended up buying a hold down clamp, but if you want to make your own, I'll leave a link to a video by Christofix where he makes a couple of different styles of hold down clamps. It's a pretty cool video. The last thing to do was to loosen everything up and crank the handle up and down and make sure my hand didn't run into the table. And everything looked good. And with that, the project is done. I hope you guys liked the video, and if you did, give it a thumbs up, leave me a comment, and consider subscribing to the channel.